king. Pennsylvania Freight Station number 1422 opened for service in 1917. It was located where weeds now grow. This was the scene on December 4th, 1979, when Conrail train CB-20 with RS-3 number 9909 came to pick up an empty car. The freight station was demolished on April 12, 1982. This remaining 70-foot-long section of 24-inch gauge track lies abandoned and lingers on from 1921 when it was laid. The U.S. Army narrow gauge railroad line provided the necessary transportation for troops traveling between the main post or cantonment area out to the rifle ranges a few miles away. The Baldwin steam locomotives, which first powered the line, were replaced by gasoline-engined Plymouths in 1941. The remainder of the track was torn up after cessation of operations in 1947. The disposition of the narrow gauge equipment and locomotives is not known at this time. Penn Central GP30 number 2200 was on the south side of the Great Double Track Loop near the Wrightstown Circle in 1976 when photographed. This loop will disappear in the near future when the Army rails are removed from Fort Dix. The troop trains and freight traffic which ran around this loop now exist only in our memories and photographs. UT Station number 55 in Wrightstown was also designated as number 1405 by the Pennsylvania. The station was demolished about 1968. All that remains is the concrete curbing. We are just 1 mile from the Fort Dix station. A milk platform set across the tracks from the passenger station, and the freight station was located to the left of the blue tank. The final straw, which led to the removal of the rails, came on August 31st, 1978, as flooding washed out the track bed which used to cross this gully along Meany Road on the north side of Cookstown, just 4 miles out of Fort Dix. Shortly thereafter, Conrail had the track removed. The Cookstown station was located just to the west of this site and assigned to number 1406 by the Pennsylvania and number 50 by the UT. .2 miles northeast of Fort Dix is where the New Egypt passenger station was located. UT Station number 45, also known as PRR number 1407, was damaged by fire in 1974 and razed the following year. For many years, this was home to the Union Transportation Company. This view was photographed in November 1974. The Pennsylvania Railroad operated the Pemberton and Hightstown rails through here until 1888, when severe winter snows gave them reason to halt trains, as there were no plows available. Of all the plows manufactured here in New Jersey, none could be found east of the Mississippi, and they all were quite busy. The local farmers organized and founded the UT to replace the trains that the Pennsylvania stopped. Milk and other vital commodities had to be shipped regardless of weather. For the next 81 years, the UT operated with a profit until 1969 and was the only railroad in New Jersey to exit the field with money in the bank. The freight station, which was located on the east side of Evergreen Road, was raised several years after the passenger station. This view is from September 1978. Here is the same scene as it appears today. For many years, carloads of tomatoes would pass by en route to Camden to become Campbell's tomato soup. It is also interesting to note that New Egypt is designated as the geographical center of the state of New Jersey. There was an Armstrong turntable located near the front door of the engine house. This turntable came from Medford in 1909 and was moved in 1979 to the Pine Creek Railroad at Delaware State Park near Farmingdale, New Jersey. The last locomotive used by the UT was former Penn Central GS4 number 9999. This scene shows the engine crossing the New Egypt Trestle northbound in November 1974. Conrail took possession of the 44-ton diesel right after they embargoed the line in 1977. This stalwart from the Pennsylvania Railroad was sold to a scrap firm in Ohio, where she still runs. To learn more about the Union Transportation Company, an excellent book entitled The Pemberton and Hightstown, authored by John Brinkman of Edison, New Jersey, covers the history of the Pemberton and Wrightstown, along with some history of the Kincora Branch and the Camden and Amboy. Copies are still available from Mr. Brinkman. In 1869, as the rail laying proceeded north from Pemberton, 13.3 miles away, and south from Hightstown, 11.1 miles away, the stage was being set for a grand celebration here in Hornerstown. With all the regalia of the Golden Spike ceremony, which occurred at Promontory Point, Utah on May 10th earlier this year, the 24.4 miles of Pemberton and Hightstown Railroad had been completed in less than 1 year's time. During the years to follow, Hornerstown became the center of many livestock drives in central New Jersey. The UT had assigned Hornerstown Station as number 40, while the Pennsylvania knew it as number 1408. The station was moved nearby and incorporated into the residence of Fred Johnson, a one-time official of the UT. Just on the west side of town were the tracks of the Cream Ridge Marl and Transportation Company. They shipped marl, a soil enricher, from nearby fields onto the UT for destinations offline. Mr. Brinkman states in his book that there is no record of any locomotives or cars ever having worn the CRM&T logo. This wooden trestle over the Lahaway Creek lingers on into a 2nd century without any chance of bearing the weight of a train ever again. Adjacent to the trestle is a steel bridge built in 1893 by Dean Westbrook of New York. This bridge is, itself, historically significant, as there are few like it remaining in the area. UT Station number 20 in Shrewsbury was active up until about March 1955. This was also the end of track for the UT until the final train departed for Fort Dix on March 31st, 1977. Service between here and Hightstown, 5.3 miles to the north, was severed when the New Jersey Turnpike was constructed in the early 1950s. Ironically, when Interstate 195 was built in the early 70s, the rails were not severed like they had been 2 decades before. The I-195 overpass, which is 4/10 of a mile to the south, serves as a vivid reminder of the fallen flag of the UT. Just 2.5 miles south of exit 8 of the New Jersey Turnpike is where the UT was severed. We are looking north toward Hightstown from the Windsor-Perrineville Road. The UT track bed has been traceable up to this point, as portions of it are dirt roads. Between here and Hightstown, the track bed cuts across country and is not easily seen. The UT abandoned the northern portion of their line in Hightstown on March 30th, 1950. The highway crossings have long since faded into history. The old Camden and Amboy right-of-way, from this point heading north, was denuded of rails about 10 years ago itself. Only the utility poles remain to mark the location of the former UT track bed. From here, we will travel back to South Pemberton to pick up the Atlantic Division main line and continue our trek eastward. We're on Hanover Street in Pemberton, just 1/2 mile south of the North Pemberton station, which we had visited earlier. Birmingham lies 1 mile to the west along this portion of the Pemberton and New York Railroad. This is where the South Pemberton station was located. In 1890, nearly 6,000 cars, loaded with 300,000 tons of sand, were shipped from a local sand quarry nearby to a filtration plant in the Holmesburg section of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Station number 1502 was constructed by the Camden and Amboy in 1893, after the Pennsylvania bought the Pemberton and New York Railroad from the New Jersey Southern. South Pemberton Station was rebuilt in 1909. The telegraph code was SB. Sometime during the mid-1950s, the station was reportedly relocated several miles east near Keswick Grove. During the winter storms of 1940, there were 3 trains stuck in the snow near the station and couldn't move an inch. New Lisbon was designated as station number 1505 and located at milepost 28, just 4.2 miles east of Birmingham and 1/10 of a mile west of the Kincora Branch Junction. The Kincora Branch was originally laid so wood and charcoal could be hauled from nearby forests to Kincora. The New Lisbon telegraph code was SY. As we travel eastward, we will pass through a portion of the famed New Jersey Pine Barrens. Station 1506 at Browns Mills Junction closed in 1938. There was a 1.8-mile branch line running north into town where the station was known as Browns Mills in the Pines. We are 29.7 miles east of Camden. This HO scale model of Browns Mills in the Pines station shows just how small the building actually was. The trains would pull into town, offload and onload passengers, and any less than carload freight, turn on an adjacent Y, and depart town. The station site was later occupied by a bowling alley and then a tavern. This diorama actually depicts the North Pemberton station. Note the size comparison of the two stations. The station was once located at the intersection of Lakehurst Road and Rancocas Lane. In 1873, a local political leader by the name of John Horner had kept the railroad out of town by saying it was a dangerous and impractical experiment. His actions doomed the trade of this once popular resort town as rail passengers bypassed Brown's Mills for the Jersey Shore resorts. 16 years later, in 1889, another hotel owner, James Riley, came from Atlantic City to begin construction on a hotel that would eventually become the Pig and Whistle Inn. He had also succeeded in changing the opinion of townsfolk. This resulted in the Pennsylvania laying rail north from the main line. This house was built for the vice president of the Pennsylvania Railroad as a summer resort home. It was moved from its original site along Lakehurst Road in the late 1970s, where McDonald's Golden Arches now stand, to this location directly across the street from the post office on Dearborn Avenue. These stones were placed in 1870 during the construction of the Pemberton and New York Railroad. Passenger service along the P&NY began quietly on July 4th, 1870, which was somewhat unusual considering it was Independence Day. The Route 70 highway overpass at Upton Station was demolished in 1984 due to structural weakness. These views show the demolition work progressing. This is the same scene today. All that now exists of once was Upton is about a dozen homes. In 1930, Upton was named for Boston millionaire George B. Upton, who owned 25,000 acres here. Prior to that time, this tiny town had the following names, in the order of Gravel Switch, Hanover, Hanover Station, Hanover Farms, Gravel Switch, Hanover Farms, and finally Upton. The first rail exports from this area were charcoal and wood, soon followed by blueberries, huckleberries, sand, and lumber. Half a century earlier, Mr. Upton helped to finance the construction of the railroad through here. Upton Station was known to the Pennsy as station number 1510, with telegraph code VN, and located at milepost 33.6. The last station agent was Asa Pittman, who was more commonly known as Rattlesnake Ace. During his lifetime, he collected nearly 6,000 rattlers from the surrounding area, which he sent to museums, zoos, and shoe manufacturers. At one time, this area was referred to as being the rattlesnake capital due to the high concentration of rattlers. The French Huguenots, who first settled in nearby Mount Misery, learned a neat trick from the native Indians. Whenever they were to walk down a forest path to visit their neighbors, they would let their hogs walk ahead of them. The hog's layer of fat was impervious to snake venom, so when the rattler would announce itself by shaking its tail or by striking the hog, the Frenchman would avoid its location. At the turn of the century, Brandif Sand and Gravel Company, Cement Products Company, Natural Resources Development Company, Bader Mill and Lumber Company, and the Eureka Sand Company were among the many businesses that had established themselves here and turned tiny little Upton into a major shipping center consisting of several dozen buildings. Land once sold for $4 an acre at public sales when the businesses couldn't pay their taxes. Today, you may be able to purchase an acre for about $40,000. In 1932, Hanover Farms Lumber Company had a private siding, which the Pensy tore up when they discovered that there was no formal agreement for that siding to exist. A fellow by the name of John Buckingham started a lumber camp here in 1878. We are 38 miles east of Camden and 12 miles west of Toms River. Pennsylvania Station number 1515, whose telegraph code was BA, a passing siding, and a private siding once existed here. We have left Burlington County and entered Ocean County. We are also in the Pine Barrens. Buckingham's camp grew into a village consisting of nearly 100 homes and even had a school. The main product was cedar shakes and shingles, which sold for $8 a thousand. Lumber used for shipbuilding and charcoal were other wood products exported from the pines. The town continued to prosper under Mr. Buckingham's guidance and name for 15 years, until a bull driven insane by countless mosquito attacks gored John's daughter to death as he hopelessly watched. With that incident, the Jersey mosquito found its own particular spot in the history books. After Buckingham left the area, the town virtually disappeared. Soon after, another attempt was made to establish a business here. It was known as Van Note Camp, and like Buckingham, it too is now gone. The state of New Jersey now owns this land, which is part of Lebanon State Forest. The Whiting Station served the Pennsylvania as WI, the Jersey Central as number 772, and the Tuckerton Railroad. Whiting answered to telegraph code WN. During the late 1800s, trains of all three railroads would meet at the station at noon. There was a bustle of activity as passengers changed trains. On April 9, 1897, a fire claimed the original structure. 1 year later, a new two-story combination station, quarters, and interlocking plant was constructed. The agent lived in the station upstairs. The structure was demolished about 1960. When the Pennsylvania entered town through the acquisition of the Pemberton and New York Railroad, subsequently renamed to be the Pemberton and Seashore, speculation began that tracks would soon be laid to compete for New Jersey Southern and Tuckerton business. The name Pemberton and Seashore was the main cause for alarm by the rivals. On September 24, 1880, the Pemberton and Seashore name was changed to become the Philadelphia and Long Branch Railroad. Now that the 2 points were identified, the rivals could breathe a bit easier. Soon thereafter, Pennsylvania rails began to head east for Seaside Park. Nathan Whiting built a sawmill in 1852 which flourished for 20 years near this site. The town was named for him. Mr. Whiting had the honor of deeding the very first parcel of land to the Manchester and Barnegat Bay Railroad on May 2, 1870. The Manchester and Barnegat Bay would become the Tuckerton Railroad on February 15, 1871, when the New Jersey legislature approved the name change. Earlier we talked a little bit about Hezekiah B. Smith of Smithville. Prior to his automobile inventing, he was a director of the Tuckerton Railroad. At one time, Tuckerton was a part of Burlington County until 1891, when a small portion of Burlington County, which included Tuckerton, was annexed to Ocean County. The Jersey Central rails still exist. We believe they are now owned by the Pine Belt Railway. running between Woodmansey, just south of here, and Lakehurst to the north. These rails were laid by the Raritan and Delaware Bay Railroad in 1856. The Raritan and Delaware Bay was absorbed by the New Jersey Southern in 1869 and would become the Central Railroad of New Jersey in 1894, and then Conrail in 1976. There are two GP9s at the Woodmansey Sand Quarry site, which are former Conrail units. Rail service ends at the quarry site, but at one time went all the way to the Delaware Bay. The famed Central Jersey Blue Comet made her inaugural run from New York City to Atlantic City, passed here on February 21st, 1929. The Blue Comet was powered by one of any three Baldwin Pacific Class 462s of the CNJ, sporting a blue paint scheme. She lived for a dozen years until the final run on September 27, 1941. Unfortunately, none of the steamers were preserved, but some of the coaches were around many years later. During one weekend in October 1978, the Blue Comet was resurrected and ran along the New York and Long Branch rails through Red Bank, Long Branch, Asbury Park, and Bay Head. Powered by Whippany River Railroad Pacific number 148, with the Statue of Liberty Herald adorning the sides of her tender, the smell of steam and thunder of exhaust would be experienced once again, if even just for one weekend. The remains of the old station are slowly disappearing, along with the remains of the Tuckerton. The Tuckerton Railroad ran from here, southeast through Barnegat, Manahawkin, and into Tuckerton. At Manahawkin, the line branched off to Long Beach Island, where tracks connected Barnegat Light on the north end and Beach Haven on the south end. Scheduled passenger service began on the Tuckerton on November 15, 1871, and terminated on January 31, 1936, at 3:44 p.m. when train number 11 arrived here. The Pensy Combine car was set out for pickup, other empty cars placed on a siding, and Tuckerton engine number 10 rolled south for the last time. As the fire died in the steamer that evening, the Tuckerton followed suit. The ICC blessed abandonment by the Tuckerton just 3 weeks later. Rails were lifted in 1940 after the Southern New Jersey Railroad had operated the line for 1 year unprofitably. As the Tuckerton died, model railroading would enter its second century. In 1836, a Vermont blacksmith by the name of Thomas Davenport devised a small electric motor and fitted it into an equally small model locomotive. It never caught the public's attention and was shelved until 1851, when it again was offered openly. History repeated itself, as the model railroad idea was labeled as being ahead of its time, and once again it was shelved. The Tuckerton never used heavy power. In fact, one of the last steam engines to operate on Tuckerton rails was a leased American Class 440, which is still in operation today, pulling passenger coaches. Pennsylvania number 1223 now runs over the Strasburg Railroad in Strasburg, Pennsylvania. To learn more about the Tuckerton, another book authored by John Brinkman covers the history of the Tuckerton Railroad. The book was a limited private printing of 1,000 copies in 1973, so check with your library for a copy. At the present time, Mr. Brinkman is considering the possibility of reprinting his book. In Crossley, United Clay Mines operated a 36-inch gauge track between the Pensy and their clay pits just to the north of this site, which is less than 5 miles from Toms River. The Pensy referred to Crossley as station number 1522. There is evidence here that the siding used by the Pensy and United Clay was a dual gauge track. However, it is quite overgrown as nature is reclaiming this entire site. Toms River Station, number 1528, was moved about 3/4 of a mile east from its original location and converted into a dwelling. In June 1952, the Public Utilities Commission approved the removal of 4 Pennsy trains from the Pemberton to Toms River schedule, thereby permitting the end of passenger service to this shore resort. The last Philadelphia to Toms River Railway Post Office operated on June 21st. Train number 979 carried the final RPO mail from Philadelphia and ended its run in front of this structure. As the train returned to Camden, the last RPO mail from Toms River was aboard. The telegraph code for Toms River was, quite appropriately, TR. We are looking east along Railroad Avenue, also known as Route 9, which was once the Pennsylvania trackbed. We are now 49.8 miles from Camden. Not far beyond this point to the east, the Barnegat branch of the Central Jersey crossed the Pennsy on its route south to Waretown and Barnegat. The Pennsy rails through here were lifted in the mid-1960s, while the CNJ freight rails lasted for another 2 decades. The 1.1-mile Island Heights branch once spanned this 1,800-foot distance across the Toms River between Pine Beach, where Riverbank Station answered to telegraph code RJ, and Island Heights Station, which used telegraph code RH. Station number 1561 at Island Heights was built in 1884 upon pilings over the river and adjacent to the shoreline. The tracks ran along the sandy beach for a short distance. The first train into Island Heights arrived in June 1884. Island Heights Station was 54.4 miles from Camden. The end came in 1934 when the trestle was demolished. Former PRR station number 1532 in Ocean Gate now serves the municipality as a storage building after being moved from its original location. The telegraph code was GE. The structure is unchanged in design and was located 54.8 miles east of Camden. The 7,000-foot-long wooden trestle, which had spanned the Barnegat Bay, was partially destroyed by fire in December 1946 and would never carry a train again. Located near the middle of the span, station number 1533 answered to telegraph code BN. We have traveled 56.3 miles from Camden. Rail reached Seaside Park in 1881 from across the bay. The first official passenger train arrived from Burlington on July 12, 1881. The final remaining section of the trestle has recently been replaced by a new pier. Trains traveling from Camden have been heading in an eastward direction. From here, they will turn to the north for Bayhead Junction, which is just 11.1 miles away. The curious onlooker may never know that rails once ran through here. This trestle, originally built for transportation, had been relegated to recreation until replaced in the summer of 1988. The next stop would be Pennsylvania Station number 1537, located at Central and Hamilton Avenues in Seaside Heights, 59.9 miles from Camden. The telegraph code was SI. It was built in 1916 and has served many purposes through the years after the rails were removed. Prior to being utilized as a thrift shop for a local hospital, it had been a bus depot and a restaurant. The track used to lie where the roadway now is. This private dwelling was once station number 1539 in Lavalette, answering to telegraph code VA. It was built circa 1916 and located just 2.6 miles north of Seaside Heights, along the southbound portion of State Highway 35, which was formerly the Philadelphia and Long Branch Railroad. This is where the trains from Camden joined into the New York and Long Branch rails after traveling across the state of New Jersey for a distance of 69.1 miles from Camden Station. This is also the end of the Eastern Region Atlantic Division and the beginning of the New York Zone New York Division. Bayhead Station was known to the Pennsylvania as number 1546 and to the New York and Long Branch as number 130. The telegraph code was BH. The Pennsy rails heading south to Seaside Park were lifted in 1949. In 1986, this newly constructed building replaced two aging Central Jersey coaches which formerly served as offices. Those coaches had, at one time, been a part of the Blue Comet's consist, of which one was observation car number 1169, the Temple. New Jersey Transit operates all passenger trains between New York City and Bay Head. The line is now referred to as the North Jersey Coastline. The New York and Long Branch was constructed in 1870, and on December 2, 1881, the Pennsylvania Railroad and the New Jersey Southern Railroad entered into an agreement for joint ownership and operation of the New York and Long Branch. In later years, the New Jersey Southern would become a part of the Central Railroad of New Jersey. The New York and Long Branch never owned any motive power of their own, so during the years before New Jersey Transit took over operation, you would see numerous Jersey Central, Pennsylvania, Penn Central, and Conrail units operating over this line. In 1882, the New York Central took control of the Reading Railroad. This may not appear to be significant, and it wasn't until another year had passed, when, in 1883, the railroads across the United States were adopting standard time, the Reading took control of the New Jersey Southern. Now the mighty New York Central and rival Pennsylvania had joint control of the New York and Long Branch. The Pennsy went to court and obtained an injunction to prevent any further action from occurring. Shortly thereafter, the Reading released all interest in the New Jersey Southern. 93 years after the fight for control had occurred, we find these railroads joined together under one flag, Conrail. Trains which travel along the Jersey coastline cross many bridges each and every day. Railroaders and bridge operators alike must make sure that every aspect of their operation is performed correctly, on time, every time. This was the case on September 15, 1958. But this time, fate would interrupt a normal routine run when a Jersey Central passenger train bound for New York City terminated its run in the history books instead. The passenger train operated on the Jersey Central Raritan line, but just as easily could have departed from Bay Head. The Newark Bay drawbridge had opened to permit the freighter Sand Captain to pass. The bridge was fully protected by automatic devices which included a derailleur. The twin diesels pulling 5 coaches passed through 2 stop signals, hit the derailleur at 42 miles per hour, and skidded for over 500 feet and then plunged into the Newark Bay. The death toll included 48 passengers who drowned. The last 2 coaches remained on the bridge while both of the locomotives and the first 2 coaches instantly sank into the water. The third coach hung precariously for a short period of time before it too plunged into the drink. Railroading would never be the same after that incident, as it prompted the development of a new safety device. We know it now as the dead man control. Why? Well, the train did not stop at the first warning signal because the engineer had already suffered a fatal heart attack. The lead unit was CNJ 1532, followed by the 1526. Both were GP7s. After the accident, both were rebuilt and returned to service. The 1526 was renumbered to 1531. Both were sold to the Lehigh in New England on June 1st, 1962. They were reacquired by the CNJ when the L and NE sold out. The 1532 was seen here at Lakehurst on December 23, 1976, still sporting its original number. She was renumbered to Conrail 5679 and now seen at Red Bank on September 17, 1977. She was retired on November 3, 1980. The 1531 was sold to the Pittsburgh and Chalmette and renumbered 102. Our records also indicate that 1531 was sold to Naparanos in June of 1985. Final disposition of both units is not clearly certain. At Whiting's, it was mentioned that the former CNJ tracks running between Lakehurst and the Woodmansey Sand Quarry were owned by the Pine Belt Railway. It was recently ascertained that the tracks are owned by Clayton Sand and Gravel, who also owns the quarry. Rail operation is contracted to the Ashland Railway, who operates the twin jeeps as seen here in Lakehurst on October 5, 1986.